Welcome back, dearly beloved chosen ones. They say a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still tying its shoes. But what they don't tell you is, even barefoot, the truth still wins the race. And you, chosen one, have been running that race quietly, gracefully, while others tossed shadows and stories in your path. Yet, here you are, still glowing, still grounded, and now that the dust is finally settling, your truth is standing taller than every lie that tried to erase you. This is not the moment for whispers. This is the hour for revelation. For years, you've been the center of controversy you didn't cause, the target of tension you didn't create. Your name has been dissected in group chats, misunderstood in family circles, and mishandled by those too uncomfortable to face their own reflection. They weren't obsessed with you because you were chaotic. They were obsessed because you were clear. You didn't disrupt the room by shouting. You disrupted it by not performing. You didn't cause the storm. You were the calm that made their inner weather system collapse. Psychologists say that people often scapegoat the one who silently reflects what they've buried deep. You didn't try to shake the table. You just sat at it, and the legs started trembling. That's not aggression. That's presence. That's spiritual pressure. And you, chosen one, carry it without saying a word. But now the illusion is cracking. Even the spectators, the ones who clapped for your fall and passed popcorn during your pain, they're exhausted, not from you, but from defending people who can't keep their own stories straight. The narrative has changed so many times, even they've forgotten the original script. And now, it shows. So, before we go any further, pause with me for a moment of gratitude to every soul who has walked with this message, who has liked, shared, prayed, and especially to those who've given through super thanks. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I honor you. Whether you sow financially or simply show up with your spirit, you are seen. And if you've never given but you're still here, know this, I'm already grateful for your presence. You matter. Now, if you've already felt the confirmation in your soul as we speak, go ahead and type 777 in the comments right now. Let that be your divine agreement, your prophetic alignment, your signal to heaven that says, I'm ready for this truth. I'm aligned with this awakening. I'm walking in my anointing. Because what's coming next? It's not revenge. It's redemption. It's not exposure. It's exodus. In this message, we're going to uncover why your truth has outlived their fiction, why even your critics are too tired to pretend, why your silence shook more than their shouting ever could. Because this is the season where God vindicates the voices that refuse to break character just to be accepted. You are that voice. You are that vessel. Welcome back, chosen one. The light you carry is speaking louder than ever, and this time the world is finally listening. Let's begin. God's chosen ones. People are tired of arguing about you. You were never the problem. Number one, they weren't defending you. They were preserving the lie they crafted to protect themselves. Chosen one, have you ever wondered why so many people felt the need to talk about you when you weren't even in the room? Why your name echoed in conversations that should have never been yours to begin with? It wasn't because they were confused. It wasn't even about trying to figure you out. Deep down, they knew exactly who you were, but instead of honoring the truth about your character, they clung to a distorted version of you, a version they could control, criticize, and conveniently blame. Why? Because that version helped them avoid looking at themselves. Isn't it interesting how some people will argue passionately, not for truth, but to protect their false comfort zones? They didn't rally to your defense because defending you meant dismantling the narrative they agreed to believe. If they admitted you were never the problem, it would force them to confront their own silence, their own betrayal, their own complicity. Can you imagine the discomfort of realizing you joined the crowd against someone innocent? Not because you knew, but because it felt easier. Remember what Jesus said in John 8:32. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. But the truth doesn't feel like freedom when it first arrives. It feels like exposure, like guilt, like standing in a room where every mirror finally reflects your own face. And that's what happened to them. When your truth began to rise, through your peace, your consistency, your growth, they couldn't fight what was undeniable. They panicked, not because you changed, but because their stories started to fall apart. Think of how Meghan Markle was painted by the media for simply existing in her truth. Calm, poised, unwilling to play into the royal performance. For years, people weren't defending her. They were defending the fairy tale they wanted to believe about the monarchy. When her calmness revealed cracks in the system, the attacks intensified, but eventually the truth outlived the lie. So will yours. What if their silence wasn't ignorance but strategy? What if the gossip wasn't misunderstanding but misdirection? When people are too afraid to confront their guilt, they turn on the one who reminds them of it. Proverbs 12:19 tells us, "Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment." That's what you're seeing now. Their arguments are fading. Their passion has dimmed. Not because you changed, but because the lie has run out of fuel. Oprah Winfrey once said, "You get in life what you have the courage to ask for." But what she didn't say is that courage costs you relationships with people who are only loyal to your silence. The moment you stepped into your truth, you disrupted their illusion. They're tired, not because of who you are, but because of the exhausting effort it took to keep pretending you were someone else. Have you noticed the room growing quieter, the texts slowing down? The people who once argued so loudly about your worth are now sitting in an awkward silence. That's not peace. That's conviction, and it's showing. The light you carry exposed the lie they tried to live in. And the truth? They're not upset with you. They're uncomfortable with themselves. Even biblical figures weren't immune to this dynamic. Consider how Joseph's brothers argued and plotted, not because he did anything wrong, but because his dreams exposed their lack of vision. Genesis 50:20 reveals the redemption. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. Your story follows the same rhythm. What they meant for your destruction is turning into your divine elevation. Selena Gomez once said, "If you are broken, you do not have to stay broken." But what she didn't say is that healing will confuse the people who got used to your wounded version. They were defending their roles in the story of your brokenness, not your reality. Now that you're whole, their story makes no sense, and they're too tired to rewrite it. So, chosen one, why did so many people agree to the same version of a lie? And more importantly, why are they now so quiet as your truth becomes undeniable? The answer is not about you, it's about what you represent. You are the evidence of what it looks like to rise without retaliation, to evolve without explanation, and to expose deception simply by being who you are. As the lie collapses under the weight of time, Isaiah 54:17 stands tall over your life. No weapon that is formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against you in judgment, you shall condemn. You didn't fight the lie with vengeance. You let time, truth, and testimony speak on your behalf. And now the world is seeing you were never the problem. The real issue was how many people needed you to be one, just to avoid themselves. Number 2, the real conflict was never about your actions. It was the internal war they were losing with themselves every time your presence reflected their unresolved truth. Chosen one, you need to understand this clearly. When people made you the center of controversy, you weren't the real issue. You were the mirror, the arguments, the side conversations, the smear campaigns. They had less to do with what you said or did, and more to do with what your presence stirred within them. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension shift, even though you said nothing? That's because your energy isn't passive, it's prophetic. It reveals things people are trying hard to hide. So ask yourself, why did your silence make so many people loud? Why did your calmness become a threat to their chaos? Why did your confidence expose their insecurities? It's because your existence highlighted a version of themselves they didn't want to see. You didn't bring drama, you brought clarity, and clarity always disrupts deception. Just like a mirror doesn't cause the blemish, it only reveals it. Your presence showed them their inner wounds, and rather than heal, they hurled stones. But here's the truth you must stand on. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. You are that light, and light naturally exposes what's been hiding too long. Think about Princess Diana. Her authenticity, compassion, and refusal to conform made her beloved by the public, but a threat to the royal institution. She didn't try to be rebellious, she simply chose truth over pretense, and that alone revealed the dysfunction that others were desperate to conceal. She became the scapegoat for a war between image and integrity. Sound familiar? You've likely experienced the same. People accused you of being too much, too distant, too mysterious, when in fact all you did was refuse to shrink. And because they couldn't control you, they tried to condemn you. But what if the truth is this? They weren't reacting to you. They were reacting to their unhealed selves through you. You just happened to be the mirror that wouldn't lie back to them. The Apostle Paul experienced this too. In Acts 23:1, Paul says, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." Yet still, people accused him, beat him, imprisoned him. Not because he was wrong, but because his truth shattered the systems they relied on. That's your story too. Your peace, your refusal to conform, became offensive to those addicted to performance. Look at Keanu Reeves. Despite being one of the most grounded and private celebrities in Hollywood, people tried to assign all kinds of labels to him. Some called him antisocial, some called him strange. But over time, people realized it wasn't Keanu who was the problem. It was that his quiet truth made the noise around him unbearable. And in time, the truth outlasted the rumor. So why were they always so animated when talking about you? Why was your name the one they dragged into debates and disputes that didn't even belong to you? It's because you were unknowingly disrupting their illusions. You were holding up a spiritual mirror they couldn't shatter. And when people see themselves too clearly, they either change or blame the one who exposed the reflection. Proverbs 27:19 says, "As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart." Your life, your walk, your peace, your unwavering spirit reflected their heart conditions, and that terrified them more than anything you could ever say. That's why they shouted over your stillness. That's why they gathered in corners to dissect your every move. It wasn't about justice, it was about projection. Even someone like Simone Biles, a decorated Olympian, faced backlash when she prioritized her mental health. People said she was letting her country down, being dramatic or seeking attention, but none of that was true. The backlash wasn't about her actions. It was about how her courage to choose wellness over performance made others question their own limits, boundaries, and burnout. And that inner conflict, it spilled out as criticism. Chosen one, hear this. You were never the fire starter. You were the flashlight. You didn't provoke the breakdown. They were already breaking inside. You just illuminated the cracks, and now the drama is dying down. The gossip is running out of breath. The same people who couldn't stop analyzing you are now silent. Not because you disappeared, but because their masks have slipped too far to fix. They're exhausted, not from your presence, but from the performance they've been putting on for too long. Their anger was never about you. Their war was internal, and you were the battlefield they projected it onto. Romans 12:21 reminds you, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." That's what you've done, chosen one. You've stayed steady, grounded, unbothered, while storms swirled around your name. You didn't retaliate, you reflected, you didn't argue, you aligned. And now, people are realizing something deeply uncomfortable. They were never fighting you, they were avoiding themselves. So, what happens when a mirror refuses to lie? What happens when your presence can't be twisted to fit their narrative? The answer is unfolding now. The smoke is clearing, the room is quiet, the masks are heavy, and the truth, your truth, is standing taller than ever. Number 3, they weaponized their insecurities, and you became the target they couldn't hit. Chosen one, they didn't come for you because you were harmful. They came because you didn't flinch. Your peace in a reactive world made you a mystery they couldn't decode. You didn't fold under pressure. You didn't scramble for approval. And that kind of unshakable presence becomes a threat to anyone who hasn't built their worth from within. You didn't have to speak loudly. Your silence exposed their storms, and that unsettled them. Have you noticed how people who can't control themselves will try to control the story about someone who can? That's what happened to you. You became the projection screen for their inner chaos. They didn't throw insults at you because you did something wrong. They did it because you were living right. Your growth became their trigger. Your stillness made them restless. And when insecure people are confronted with someone they cannot intimidate, they often do something dangerous. They turn their internal pain outward and aim it at you. This is what Scripture means in Matthew 5:11, when it says, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." You were chosen, and your very existence was a reminder of everything they denied within themselves. So instead of facing it, they twisted it. They exaggerated your flaws, invented scandals, and tried to turn others against you. Not because you did anything, but because they couldn't handle what your life revealed about theirs. Public figures like Malala Yousafzai show us this pattern clearly. She was targeted not because she attacked anyone, but because her courage exposed the cowardice of oppressive systems. Her voice, steady and unapologetic, became the very thing that insecure leaders feared. And though they tried to silence her, the truth only grew louder. Just like with you, the more they lied, the more evident it became that you weren't reacting, you were revealing. Why do some people seem more invested in your downfall than in their own development? Why are they so obsessed with getting a reaction from someone who refuses to give them one? The answer isn't complicated, it's conviction. Your refusal to stoop to their level became the proof that they were operating beneath their own. You showed up with your head high. You chose peace when you had every reason to retaliate. You kept walking forward while they kept circling the same old stories, and people began to see it. The crowd that once listened to the gossip started noticing a pattern. The drama was always directed at you, but never created by you. And suddenly the question became not, why is this person being attacked? But why are these people working so hard to bring down someone who never struck first? Psalm 37:6 affirms this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. You didn't need revenge. Your consistency became your credibility. And their attempts to distort your character only highlighted your integrity. Consider the story of Chadwick Boseman. Quiet, dignified, radiant with strength, he was criticized for looking tired or distant while silently battling cancer. People speculated, joked, and gossiped. But once the truth came out, the world had to confront its shallowness. Your story echoes this. People talked when they didn't understand. Now they're quiet because they finally do. The truth is, chosen one, they didn't need to destroy you. They needed to destroy the image of you that made them feel inferior. And when they realized you wouldn't crumble, their weapons turned on themselves. The attacks lost their sting because you stopped giving them the platform to echo. And now, they're tired, not because you changed, but because you didn't. And that's the very thing they can't understand. You never volunteered for their battlefield, but you were equipped for it. Not by fighting dirty, but by standing tall. Not by lowering yourself, but by outlasting them. And now, without your reaction to feed their narrative, their whole game is collapsing in silence. Number 4. Your existence shattered their illusion of control. Chosen one, your mere presence caused ripples in rooms where false power once sat comfortably. You didn't storm in demanding recognition, you simply arrived whole. And that wholeness made people who relied on hierarchy feel threatened. You didn't play by the invisible rules that required you to shrink in order for them to feel tall. You just existed. And somehow that was more disruptive than any rebellion could have been. Why did your quiet confidence make so much noise? Why did your refusal to beg for attention unnerve those who had built their entire identity on being admired? The answer is simple. You didn't need their validation, and that shattered the fragile scaffolding of their egos. You revealed that true power doesn't demand applause. It walks in silently and shifts the atmosphere. Isaiah 2:22 speaks directly to this. Stop trusting in mere humans who have but a breath in their nostrils. Why hold them in esteem? You didn't bow to titles or bend for influence. You honored God first, and in doing so you exposed just how hollow their influence really was. Think about Rosa Parks. She didn't yell, she didn't argue, she simply refused to give up her seat. That one act disrupted an entire system that depended on silent submission. Her quiet strength exposed the noise of injustice. Just like you, your calm didn't make you passive. It made you powerful. It reminded those in control that their grip was never as strong as they thought. You didn't compete for space. You created your own. And that scared them, because if you could stand in your truth without their approval, then who else might stop playing their game? Your presence wasn't aggressive, but it made them feel exposed. And so they labeled you. They called you arrogant, antisocial, difficult. Not because you were any of those things, but because you refused to be manipulated into becoming less. 1 Peter 2:9 tells you exactly who you are. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. That's why you didn't need their crown to walk like royalty. You were already appointed by heaven, and they could sense it, even if they couldn't explain it. Look at Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, he didn't beg traditional power structures to accept him. He disrupted industries by thinking differently, refusing to apologize for standing out. Many powerful people in legacy systems tried to dismiss him, not because he was wrong, but because his presence undermined their comfort. Chosen one, the people who once called you too much are now realizing you were simply too whole for the broken system they depended on. You didn't break the rules. They were never divine in the first place. You just refused to play the role of the underdog when God called you to be a lion. Why were the ones who had the most power the most reactive to your calm? Why did they try so hard to clip your wings when you never asked to fly over them? Because control feels threatened by freedom. And when you walked in as your full self, unapologetic and aligned, you reminded everyone in the room of what real authority looks like: quiet, secure, and spirit-led. Psalm 75:7 declares, "It is God who judges. He brings one down, he exalts another." And now that's exactly what's unfolding. You weren't loud, but heaven was, and that disruption you caused. It wasn't rebellion, it was revelation. Now the people who once seemed so strong are starting to look shaky, and you, the one they once tried to keep in the background, are standing firm, not because you wanted power, but because truth can't be suppressed forever. Number 5. You triggered their unhealed pain, and they made you pay for someone else's betrayal. Chosen one, you didn't harm them. You revealed what had never been healed. That's what made them lash out. You walked into rooms carrying a presence that only someone who's done the deep, messy inner work could possess. You didn't carry your pain like a weapon. You carried it like wisdom. And instead of projecting your wounds, you turned them into light. But that light did something they weren't ready for. It exposed what they still hadn't dealt with. Have you ever noticed how some people react to you like you committed a crime you know nothing about? That's because your presence activated memories they never made peace with. They weren't reacting to your actions. They were reacting to the pain you unknowingly mirrored back to them. The father who left, the friend who betrayed them, the abandonment, the shame. They saw it all in you, and they blamed you for it. You didn't cause their chaos. You just walked in with clarity, and it unsettled the lies they had built for comfort. Lamentations 3:40 calls us to confront this directly. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. But instead of turning inward, they looked for an external outlet to unload their inner agony. And you, the calm one, the kind one, the one who didn't flinch, became the easiest target. Because nothing triggers unresolved trauma like someone who's already done the work. Consider the story of Naomi Osaka, a champion athlete who chose to prioritize her mental health. She didn't scream for attention, she simply protected her peace. But her decision triggered outrage. Why? Because it forced the world to look at how often we ignore pain in favor of performance. Like you, she didn't create the wound, but her presence exposed it. And that made her a lightning rod for projection. They labeled you too sensitive, too much, or too different, but in truth, you were just too real. You reminded them of who they could have been if they had faced their demons instead of silencing them. You didn't even have to speak. The way you walked, the way you set boundaries, the way you said no without guilt, it revealed everything they never resolved. Hebrews 4:13 confirms it. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of Him to whom we must give account. And when your life brought that kind of exposure into the room, they didn't confess, they attacked. Because facing their truth felt too dangerous, so they reached for the closest distraction, you. This is the pattern that played out in the life of Janet Jackson. In her infamous Super Bowl controversy, she bore the brunt of criticism, while others walked away untouched. Why? Because society needed someone to punish, even when the deeper issue had nothing to do with her. You too have been in situations where the punishment never fit the moment, because the crime wasn't yours. You just represented the wound they kept buried. So why did their reaction to you feel so disproportionate? Why did the hate never match your actions? Because it was never really about you. You just accidentally became the placeholder for pain that had nowhere else to go. But now, chosen one, something is shifting. The fog is lifting. People are starting to see that the energy didn't originate from you. It was always aimed at you. The gossip, the coldness, the false narratives, they're crumbling under the weight of inconsistency. And what's emerging is a new awareness. You weren't the villain. You were the vessel of truth. Isaiah 61:7 says this to your soul. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. You will not be marked by their projection. You will be crowned by your perseverance. So now the room is different. People are quieter, more reflective. Because you didn't just walk in and stir up trouble, you pulled the curtain back. and behind it was decades of avoidance. You didn't cause the wound. You just made it impossible for them to pretend it wasn't bleeding anymore. Number 6, you're not a threat. You're the proof they stopped believing. Chosen one, they didn't fear your ambition, they feared your aliveness. You showed up in a world addicted to numbness and refused to shrink. That kind of presence doesn't sit quietly in a corner, it disrupts. Not because you were loud or aggressive, but because you were present. And for people who traded purpose for predictability, that's unsettling. What does it say about our society that confidence is mistaken for arrogance and boundaries are labeled as attitudes? It says that most people aren't used to someone who actually knows who they are. That was you. You weren't threatening their position, you were threatening their comfort zone. You were living proof that settling isn't a survival strategy, it's a slow form of spiritual decay. Romans 12:2 declares, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's what you were doing, transforming, growing, refusing to conform. But instead of celebrating your courage, they called you too ambitious, too intense, too different. Not because you were wrong, but because you were reminding them of the dreams they had buried and the courage they never cultivated. Think of someone like Tyler Perry. He created an entire empire by trusting a vision no one else could see. He wasn't trying to steal a seat at someone else's table. He built his own. And at first, they mocked him. But now, he owns one of the largest studios in the world. Like you, he was never the threat. He was just the reminder that comfort is a choice, and greatness requires disruption. Have you ever wondered why people bristle when you speak with clarity? Why your presence makes others second-guess their own? It's because your unapologetic wholeness reflects their silent resignation. Every time you rise, you show them that mediocrity was never the only option. And that truth stings more than anything you've ever said aloud. Galatians 6:9 encourages you. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. That's the season you're entering, the season where your courage speaks louder than their comfort, where your consistency outweighs their criticism. When Frida Kahlo painted her pain and wore her boldness like armor, people didn't know how to respond. She didn't follow trends, she followed truth. And in doing so, she became immortal. You carry that same fire. Your uniqueness isn't a flaw, it's a frequency, one that only the awakened can hear and the brave can honor. You never asked for admiration, you just chose authenticity. And now, those who needed to feel superior in order to feel worthy are being exposed, not by scandal, but by your steady rise. So now, people are asking different questions, not why are you like this, but why did we settle when they didn't? Your life is becoming undeniable proof that compromise kills purpose, and your presence is becoming a holy challenge to every comfort zone around you. Proverbs 4:25-26 confirms your direction. Let your eyes look straight ahead, fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Keep walking, keep building, keep being, because now they know you were never a threat, you were a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. Number 7, you were their emotional landfill, until the stench became undeniable. Chosen one for far too long, you were everyone's emotional dumping ground. You were the one they turned to, not because they honored you, but because they thought you were strong enough to absorb the chaos they refused to face. It wasn't because you caused dysfunction, it was because you quietly carried what others lacked the courage to deal with. Their bitterness, their jealousy, their unresolved shame, they projected it onto you like trash into a bin. But just because you had the strength to hold it, doesn't mean it was ever yours to carry. Do you know how many times people blamed you for tension they created? How often did you find yourself apologizing for things that weren't your fault just to keep the peace? At some point, you stopped being seen as a person and started being treated like a container, a holding cell for guilt they didn't want to claim. Every group misunderstanding, they pinned it on you. Every emotional outburst, your fault. Every awkward moment must have been your energy. But what if none of it ever truly belonged to you? Psalm 55:22 tells you this truth clearly. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. You weren't built to be their emotional trash bin. You were built to reflect divine peace. But peace often gets mistaken for availability. And you, being the strong one, the grounded one, became the place where dysfunction felt safe to hide. They piled it on because they thought you could take it. And in their minds, that made it okay. This is what happened to Robin Williams, a man who made the world laugh while quietly carrying his own deep sadness. Many leaned on his light, but never asked about his darkness. And when he was gone, people realized the signs were always there, they just didn't look. In the same way, people only appreciated your light while it was convenient. Now that you've stepped back, they're beginning to feel the weight you used to carry for them. Have you noticed that even after you left, the arguments still continued? That the tension remained? That the same mess they blamed you for is still making noise? That's because the issue was never you. You were the one keeping it contained. You absorbed what no one else wanted to admit existed. And now that you're no longer there to soak it up, the smell of dysfunction is choking the room. The real problem is no longer hidden. It's unmistakable and undeniable. Matthew 10:26 brings clarity. So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. You were never the villain. You were the container. And now the truth is leaking through every excuse, every false narrative, every whispered rumor. They said you were too emotional, but now everyone sees you were just sensitive to dysfunction before it became toxic. They said you always made things complicated, but now people are realizing you were the only one who ever tried to keep things honest. Look at Meghan Markle again. For years she was painted as the problem, cold, difficult, divisive, but now the silence of the institution she left speaks louder than any statement. When the scapegoat leaves and the dysfunction still thrives, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. So now the ones who used to point fingers are slowly lowering their hands. Why? Because the burden they placed on you is now sitting fully in their laps, and without you there to absorb the chaos, they have to face what they've become. You weren't the cause. You were the containment, and the containment is gone. Chosen one. What if the backlash wasn't about you being disruptive, but about you being a mirror for what they never wanted to admit? What if your strength wasn't a liability? It was their mask. And now that you've stepped away, the cracks are no longer hidden. Galatians 6:5 reminds you, for each will have to bear his own load. And they are. You're not carrying it anymore. And without your silence to protect them, the stench of dishonesty is overwhelming. You were never the source of the mess. You were just the only one willing to clean it up. Now, the room smells like truth, and it's long overdue. Number 8. You exposed the system's rot, so they painted you as the threat to keep control. Chosen one. Dysfunctional systems don't attack chaos. They feed on it. What they fear is clarity. What they fear is you, because you, unlike others, did not come to fit into their script. You came to rewrite it. You didn't just question the roles, you refused to play them. And that, to a system built on silence, denial, and survival tactics, was an act of revolution. You weren't threatening individuals. You were threatening the mechanism they relied on to keep everyone in place. Families, workplaces, friend groups, they all have unspoken rules. The peacekeeper must stay silent. The black sheep takes the blame. The golden child is untouchable and no one asks questions. But you broke that pattern. You didn't yell, you didn't beg, you just existed with integrity, and that alone disrupted the script. Jeremiah 1:10 echoes your role. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. You weren't born to maintain false peace. You were born to uproot dysfunction, to challenge lies, to plant seeds of healing. And because of that, they needed to discredit you. Not because you were wrong, but because if people believed you, the whole system would fall. Take whistleblowers like Erin Brockovich. She didn't set out to be controversial. She just asked questions, refused to look away, and exposed a corrupt system that thrived on silence. The reaction? She was painted as difficult, irrational, dramatic. Why? Because her truth was too costly. That's what happened to you. You asked the wrong questions in the right room, and suddenly you were the problem. Why is it that people who call out dysfunction are always seen as disruptive? Why is the one who speaks up labeled divisive, while those who manipulate in silence are called strong? Because silence is the currency of broken systems. And your presence, your unwillingness to play along, bankrupted the lie. John 3:20 confirms this pattern. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. You carried the light. You didn't bring accusations. You brought awareness. You didn't create division. You brought honesty. And honesty will always feel like aggression in a place where deception has been normalized. Prince Harry is another example. By simply telling his story and refusing to conform to the royal narrative, he was branded the rebel, the problem, the betrayer. But over time, it became clear he wasn't attacking anyone. He was breaking free from a system that was never built for truth. Sound familiar? So now, the illusion is unraveling. You're gone, and yet the system is still struggling. The peace they claimed you disturbed has not returned. In fact, the dysfunction has become more obvious than ever. The lies are collapsing. The roles are no longer holding. And even those who once stayed silent are starting to see the cracks. You weren't the fire. You were the flashlight. And when a system burns down under its own weight, they'll remember it was never your spark. It was their refusal to heal. Isaiah 5:20 leaves no doubt. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. That's what they did. They labeled your light as trouble, your truth as rebellion. But now, the roles are reversing, and your clarity is finally being seen as what it always was: divine disruption. You weren't the problem, you were the shift. And broken systems don't survive spiritual awakenings, they collapse under them. Number 9, they're mentally exhausted. Not from you, but from upholding the lies about you. Chosen one, for years they weren't just talking about you, they were strategizing. Maintaining the false version of who they said you were took effort. It wasn't casual gossip, it was calculated performance. And that performance had a cost. Every time your name came up, they had to edit reality in real time, distort facts, and stitch together half-truths just to make the story sound convincing. But you know what happens when you build a narrative on fiction. It takes more and more energy to keep it from unraveling. They weren't at war with your actions. They were at war with the truth. And the truth never needed defending. It simply stood still while they ran circles around it. Have you ever noticed how exhausted people seem when they lie for too long? Not just emotionally tired, but spiritually drained. That's because deception has a price tag. And for them, the currency was peace of mind. Proverbs 12:19 says, "Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment." They chose the moment. You chose the endurance. and now the results are showing. The lies they told became a treadmill they couldn't get off. Always running, always explaining, always spinning. But the story never changed. The truth kept standing. You didn't even have to say anything. Their mental exhaustion became your silent vindication. Consider the story of Monica Lewinsky. For decades she was cast in a role she didn't choose, and the world ran with a narrative that was never hers to carry. It took years before people finally asked, "What if we were wrong?" The mental toll of keeping a society-wide lie intact started to crack, and the truth emerged, just like your story. The effort to keep demonizing you has worn them down, and now they're too tired to pretend they're holding up anything righteous. Why did they surround themselves with people who helped keep the story alive, even if those people were dishonest, manipulative, or cruel? Because maintaining an illusion is easier when you have company. Misery doesn't just love company, it requires it. But now, even those allies are backing away. The performance is collapsing, and the actors are walking off stage. Why? Because the energy to keep the lie alive is finally outweighing the comfort it gave. 2 Corinthians 13:8 assures us, "For we cannot do anything against the truth, but only for the truth." Eventually, even their own minds begin to rebel. Their conscience begins to whisper. Their peace becomes unsettled. And as that fatigue settles in, they realize the saddest irony. The only person they were fighting this whole time was themselves. Public figures like Britney Spears endured years of false narratives controlled by others. But now, the people who once bought into those lies are admitting the exhaustion of pretending not to see. Likewise, those who once believed the worst about you are starting to reconsider. Not because you argued, but because they're burned out by the burden of deceit. Have you ever stopped to wonder why people suddenly go quiet after obsessing over your name for years? Why the accusations slow down, the gossip dries up, and the whispers become hollow? It's because the truth has outlasted their stamina. The war they were fighting never involved you. It was a war against the truth your life kept quietly proving. Isaiah 40:31 brings this to you now. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. That's what's happening. You're rising, renewed, while they're depleted from chasing shadows. They told themselves you were the villain, but now they can barely keep the story straight, because the truth is knocking, and they're too tired to hold the door shut. They didn't lose a battle with you. They lost a battle with reality, and now the first step toward their healing is admitting you weren't the cause of their exhaustion. You were the mirror of their denial. Number 10. You disrupted the emotional economy. They couldn't profit off your purity. Chosen one, you walked into a world where emotions are currency, where every hug comes with a hidden invoice, and every kind word is a negotiation. In this emotional stock market, people trade attention, loyalty, and affection for favors, status, and control. But you operated differently. You gave from overflow. You offered love without hidden terms. You sowed kindness without keeping receipts. And in a world addicted to transactions that terrified them, you weren't naive, you were free, and that freedom made you dangerous to their games, to their egos, to their illusion of control. You weren't there to climb the emotional ladder, you came to tear it down. You weren't calculating what you could gain, you were anchored in what you could give. And that kind of generosity is a direct threat to people whose entire identity depends on keeping score. Acts 20:35 reminds us of what you embody. It is more blessed to give than to receive. You didn't need anything in return to know your worth. You weren't giving to earn validation. You were giving because you were whole. And that wholeness made those who rely on emotional manipulation feel exposed. Because if someone like you can thrive without bartering for affection, then what excuse do they have? Princess Diana's legacy echoes yours. She gave from her heart, kindness without calculation, compassion without control. She hugged the sick, fed the poor, and visited war zones without expecting applause. Her love was disruptive. And so is yours. Not because it demands attention, but because it reveals who's been giving with strings attached all along. What happens when someone enters a room and refuses to play the game? When they show up without demanding to be seen, and yet shift the entire energy simply by existing? You happen. Your presence recalibrates every dynamic, because it reminds others that purity is still possible and impossible to counterfeit. John 1:16 gives language to what you carry. Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. You give from fullness, not desperation. You love from abundance, not strategy. And people who thrive on manipulation can't stand that kind of light. It exposes the economy they built, one where generosity is rare and attention is sold. Look at Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. He offered love and empathy without agenda. In a media world built on shock and ratings, he was calm, warm, and real. Many didn't understand him. Some mocked him, but now, decades later, his emotional wealth stands untouched. Like you, he disrupted the system by refusing to play the emotional capitalism game. So why do they try to label you unrealistic, too nice, or naive? Because your authenticity dismantles their excuses. You didn't need to take to feel rich. You didn't need attention to feel seen. That's real wealth, and it's the one thing manipulation can't mimic. Proverbs 11:25 declares, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." You're not here to hoard. You're here to heal. And that's what they fear the most. Not your power, but the fact that you don't need to steal it from anyone else. Chosen one, you didn't disrupt their world by force. You did it with purity. And in a society built on performance, that's the loudest rebellion of all. You are the rare light they never saw coming, the kind that gives freely and leaves people questioning why they ever settled for anything less. Number 11. They built chaos around your calm because your stillness exposed their noise. Chosen one, they couldn't handle how unmoved you were. While they screamed, stirred drama, and invited the world to watch their manufactured chaos, you stood still, anchored, grounded, unshaken. You didn't argue, you didn't retaliate. You didn't try to correct every rumor or respond to every insult. And that stillness, that infuriated them. Because when someone refuses to engage with dysfunction, it reveals just how loud and empty the dysfunction really is. What kind of person builds a circus around someone silent? The kind who fears what your peace exposes. When you refused to perform for their attention, they panicked. They mistook your silence for submission. But it was sacred discipline. And when they realized they couldn't provoke you, they created a sideshow. They became ringmasters of chaos, shouting your name from every corner, assigning roles, creating fake scripts. They wanted to cast you as the villain in a play you never auditioned for, but you remained outside the tent, unbothered. Psalm 46:10 speaks directly to your stance. Be still and know that I am God. You weren't being passive, you were being prophetic. While they lost their minds trying to spark a reaction, you chose presence over panic. You chose God over gossip. That alone made their entire production look ridiculous, because a performance only works when the audience believes the script. And now, people are walking out of the show. Consider the example of Michelle Obama. In the face of constant media slander and personal attacks, she didn't lash out. She stayed poised, composed, graceful. Her stillness became her power, and it revealed the pettiness of those who attacked her. Like you, her refusal to descend into chaos made the noise around her look foolish. She didn't need to yell to be heard. She just kept showing up in excellence. Have you ever wondered why people try harder to disrupt your peace the quieter you become? Why the more you ignore the drama, the louder it gets? That's because stillness threatens control. When you don't respond, you disrupt their need to feel powerful. And power built on provoking others, that's not strength, it's desperation. You didn't give them the collapse they were hoping for, and that's what broke their act apart. First, Peter 3:9 affirms your approach. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing. You weren't silent because you were weak. You were silent because you were wise. And now the audience is shifting. The people who once clapped at your expense are seeing the farce for what it was. They're noticing that you weren't reactive, you were revealing. And your refusal to play the part? That exposed the entire script. Look at Keanu Reeves once more. Constantly misjudged for his quietness, people speculated and projected their stories onto him. But over time, the world began to recognize that his silence wasn't emptiness, it was depth. The noise couldn't touch him because he never fed it. You carry the same authority. Your silence isn't absence, it's resistance. So what happens when the main act refuses to dance? When the spotlight hits someone who won't play along, the crowd gets bored. The illusion dissolves. And what's left is the embarrassing truth. They were performing for someone who never even stepped on stage. Proverbs 17:27 confirms your wisdom. The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. You didn't fight the storm, you became the calm in its center. And now the entire tent is collapsing, not because you shouted it down, but because you never entered it in the first place. Chosen one, your stillness wasn't just strength, it was revelation. You were the silence they couldn't manipulate, the presence they couldn't shake. And now, as the circus folds and the lights dim, everyone's realizing you were never part of the chaos. You were the mirror it couldn't crack. Number 12. Your authenticity exposed their entire performance, and they couldn't stand the reflection. Chosen one, in a world where most people wear emotional costumes, your authenticity became a rebellion. You didn't need a script. You didn't need to rehearse. You simply showed up as yourself. No act, no filters, no edits. And that kind of raw honesty unsettled everyone pretending. Because when the real shows up, the performance gets uncomfortable. Your presence didn't judge them, it revealed them. Have you ever noticed how people who spend their lives perfecting masks can't stand being around someone who doesn't need one? Your authenticity wasn't loud, but it was piercing. It didn't try to convince anyone, it just existed. And that existence made every fake smile, every rehearsed compliment, every forced persona feel hollow. You didn't need to perform, you just were. And that being threatened the system built on pretending. 2 Corinthians 8:8 speaks to the contrast you created. I'm not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. That's what your authenticity did. It tested the sincerity of everyone around you, not through judgment, but through presence. And when they failed that test, they blamed you instead of facing themselves. Think of Jim Carrey, who after years of comedic fame spoke openly about the illusion of identity and the emptiness of performance. People mocked him at first, called him unstable. But now many look back and see he wasn't unraveling. He was waking up, just like you. When someone awakens, the world built on illusion tries to cancel them before their light gets too bright. Why do they attack those who are most real? Why do they label authenticity as too much? Because being near someone genuine makes their inauthenticity unbearable. You didn't call them out. You didn't expose their lies. You just walked in truth, and that truth did the work for you. Romans 12:9 is a declaration you've lived by. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. That's your spirit. And your genuineness is what made them squirm. It forced the people who managed impressions, instead of developing character, to finally feel the weight of their own pretense. Even someone like Lady Gaga, bold, outspoken, emotionally raw, was ridiculed for years for being too weird or too much, but she never stopped being herself. Now, millions see her as a pioneer of authenticity. Her realness outlasted the noise, and so will yours. What if your only offense was never needing the applause to keep showing up? What if your unfiltered presence became a lighthouse in a sea of pretense, and they tried to drown the light because it made their masks slip? Your authenticity, chosen one, was not just a trait. It was a spiritual disruptor, a frequency that revealed what no one dared to say. And now, people are tired of the act, tired of the show, tired of clapping for performances that don't nourish the soul. They're craving something real, and you are that real. John 3:21 wraps this up. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. You've been walking in that light all along. Not perfectly, not loudly, but truthfully. The curtain is falling, the masks are slipping, and the crowd is shifting. They're not drawn to the glitter anymore. They're drawn to the glow that can't be faked. That's why you're both admired and attacked, because your authenticity doesn't play the game. It ends it. Number 13. Their so-called proof was gossip wearing a polished disguise, but truth never needed a costume. Chosen one, the accusations against you were never built on truth. They were just whispers dressed in formality, gossip wearing a suit and tie. They made it look like evidence. They made it sound like conviction. But underneath all that performance was nothing more than recycled rumors, twisted assumptions, and emotionally charged projections. They weaponized feelings and called them facts. They cloaked their insecurity in sophisticated language and presented it as gospel. But when you stripped away the presentation, all that remained was fear. Fear of your truth, fear of your presence, fear of what your life revealed about their own. Why is it that lies often get dressed up while truth stands bare? Why do people cling to well-presented fiction instead of confronting uncomfortable reality? Because fiction feels safer when it protects their egos. And when the lie supports a system they benefit from, they don't just believe it, they defend it. Isaiah 5:23 exposes this pattern. Woe to those who acquit the guilty for a bribe, but deny justice to the innocent. That's what happened to you. The so-called evidence wasn't built to reveal, it was designed to destroy. And those who spread it didn't care if it was real, they just cared that it worked. Look at how the media once treated Amanda Knox. Her case was smeared with sensationalism, not truth. The narrative was packaged so convincingly that millions believed she was guilty. It wasn't until years later that the truth emerged, and by then, the damage had been done. Just like you, she wasn't just falsely accused. She was swallowed by a story built to control the crowd. People didn't question the lies about you because the lie was convenient. It gave them someone to blame. It gave them an escape route from their own reflection. You became the scapegoat for discomforts they didn't want to face. And those who stayed silent, they weren't neutral. They were complicit. They knew something felt off, but comfort held them hostage. John 7:24 speaks clearly. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. But appearances were all they needed to convict you. Their proof was performance. Dramatic retellings, exaggerated sighs, weaponized feelings, no facts, no truth, just noise. And they repeated it long enough that they started to believe it themselves. Have you ever wondered why some people repeat lies so convincingly? why they cling to gossip as if it's sacred truth, because to admit they were wrong means admitting they were manipulated, and that level of humility takes more strength than most are willing to summon. But here's the twist. Now the lie is exhausting them. Keeping up the illusion is draining. They're tired of performing a role in a play that's lost its plot. The people who once accused you are now sitting in silence, not because they've finally grown moral, but because their minds can no longer handle the contradiction. The gossip they championed is now haunting them. And the truth? It's not knocking, it's kicking the door down. Consider whistleblowers like Frances Haugen from Facebook. She brought receipts, real truth, real data. And instantly, the facade of trust that Facebook had built began to crumble. That's the energy you carry. You didn't just walk in with your head high, you walked in with your spirit aligned. And that alignment revealed how off balance the whole system was. Galatians 6:7 confirms the consequence. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. The gossip sowed against you is now returning to sender. The fancy lies are unraveling thread by thread, and those who fell for it are waking up in regret, not just because they hurt you, but because they lost their own clarity in the process. You weren't the fraud, the narrative was. And now, as truth shines through the holes in their story, you're standing, free, whole, and radiant. The real was always on your side. Number 14. You didn't lose. You exposed the rot they tried to hide. Chosen one, they told you that you were the reason everything fell apart. They spun it like you were the instability, but now the truth is undeniable. You weren't the problem. You were the proof. You didn't come to destroy, you came to reveal. And what you revealed was a system already crumbling from within. You weren't the crack in the wall. You were the light that made the crack visible. Have you ever stood in a room and felt the tension that everyone pretended wasn't there? Have you ever noticed how your presence alone seems to draw out hidden resentment, unresolved jealousy, unspoken wounds? That's not because you're confrontational. It's because you're consecrated. Your presence is a spotlight, and when you shine, rot has nowhere to hide. Luke 12:2 brings divine clarity. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. You were the catalyst for this disclosure, not through force, but through existence. Your spirit was so honest that it made deception uncomfortable, and their only option was to cast you out or silence you. But even after you walked away, the truth stayed, and the rot kept rising. Look at whistleblowers like Edward Snowden. They didn't create the rot, they revealed it. And in doing so, they became the enemy of powerful systems. That's what you experienced. They turned on you, not because you caused the chaos, but because you refused to pretend it wasn't there. Why do people fight harder to keep a lie alive than to heal the truth? Why are they so quick to exile the one who sees clearly? Because clarity costs them comfort, and comfort is a drug they're not ready to quit. But now the high is wearing off. The pain is setting in, and the exhaustion you see on their faces, that's the weight of denial finally collapsing. Romans 13:12 speaks of your shift. The night is nearly over, the day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. You've been carrying that armor all along, and now their darkness can't stand beside it. Oprah Winfrey once said, "Truth is powerful, and it prevails. You're living proof." For a time, they were able to convince others that you were unstable, toxic, or divisive, but time always tells the real story. And now that their performance has run out of lines, your light is the only thing still shining on stage. So, what did you really do, chosen one? You didn't lose. You survived what tried to poison you. You didn't collapse under the weight of accusation. You outlasted it. You didn't expose them out of vengeance. You simply existed in truth until the rot had no choice but to surface. John 8:32 delivers your freedom boldly. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You are not burdened by what was never yours to carry, and now that the weight is falling away, you're walking lighter, clearer, freer than ever. You revealed the rot, and in doing so, you gave healing a chance. The lie had to break before the light could come in. You weren't the cause of the breakdown. You were the beginning of the breakthrough. My beloved souls, in a world addicted to appearances, where deception often passes for strength and silence for guilt, you, God's chosen one, have remained the sacred exception. You didn't conform. You didn't play along. You didn't dress up your truth to make it more palatable. And because of that, your very existence became the divine disruption this world didn't see coming, but desperately needed. The chaos around you, it was never proof of your instability. It was evidence of how much your stillness exposed their noise. The attacks weren't about who you are, they were about what you reveal. You've stood in rooms where every word was a dagger and every glance a silent accusation, and still you refused to bow. You didn't collapse beneath the weight of projections that were never yours. Instead, you rose, not with noise, but with clarity, not with vengeance, but with presence. And now, the world is adjusting to your light. People are awakening from the illusion. They're realizing that the real enemy was never you. It was the fear of truth you carried so effortlessly. So many have spent years exhausting themselves just to avoid their own reflection. But you held the mirror without shame. You forced the masks to crack, not through violence, but through vibrational truth. And though it felt isolating at times, you weren't alone. Heaven was watching. Angels were recording. And now, history is testifying. What you've done, by simply being true to who you are, is historic. You've shaken foundations built on manipulation and exposed patterns hidden behind polite smiles. You've been misjudged, misunderstood, mislabeled, and still you've been immovable. That chosen one is divine power in action. So, from the depths of my heart, thank you. Thank you for staying until the end of this message. Thank you for having the courage to see yourself in every word spoken. Thank you for allowing your soul to sit with the truth, even when it hurts. Whether you're watching silently or sharing aloud, your presence here is sacred. If this word has resonated with you deeply and you feel led to support this message, I invite you to donate through the Super Thanks feature. It's a way of sowing back into the well you've drawn from. But please hear this. Whether you give or not, I am grateful beyond words for your presence. Your energy, your time, your spirit. It all matters, and it's more than enough. Now I bless you. I bless your rising. I bless your restoration. I bless your clarity, your courage, and your calling. May every lie spoken against you unravel. May every false label fall. May the truth about you blaze so brightly that even your enemies are silenced in awe. May you walk in a peace so unshakable that even storms bow before it. You are not the villain. You are the vessel. You are not the cause of collapse. You are the beginning of cleansing. You are not what they said. You are what God has declared. And as this spell of deception breaks, may your light lead others home. We see you, we honor you, and we thank God for your life.